Okay, welcome to Signal Traditions. We've been making our way through the book of Matthew, looking at how he, that is Matthew, uses the Old Testament. Now, when I say Matthew, that could also be Jesus himself, as reported by Matthew. And of course, actually in Matthew chapter 4, where we are today, we're going to see exactly that. We have Jesus uh, quoting several places in the Old Testament. And then we have the voice of the narrator, Matthew, also doing the same. So let's look over here. This one's going to be a fun one. We have Jesus going into the wilderness to be tempted by Satan. And when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry afterward. Well, I imagine so, right? Um, now, this whole 40 days thing, I have suggested in a previous video that this is intentionally paralleling the 40 years that Israel spent in the wilderness. Now, I do want to clarify something. So, of course, you remember the Exodus story. You have Israel coming out of Egypt through the Red Sea, and then you have, of course, there's the 40 years in the desert. So, Jesus, on the other hand, we've just seen in chapter 3 that he was baptized by John the Baptist in the Jordan River, and immediately afterward, he is led by the Spirit into the wilderness. Okay, this is quite a striking parallel. He passes through the water, and then he goes into the wilderness for 40, not years, but days. Okay, now this parallel, when I say it's intentional, like, I don't just mean that Matthew is doing some kind of literary thing here and that maybe he's just making it up or something. Some people get confused about this. No, I mean that literally in the actual life of Jesus, it was intended to parallel, to call to mind, to fulfill even the history of Israel. Okay, so this is intentional in the mind of God. Now, let's move on here. We have some interesting things going on. I think we may just read this whole chapter. So when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry afterward. The tempter came and said to him, If you are the Son of God, command that the stones, or that these stones, become bread. But Jesus answered, It is written, Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. By the way, where does this come from? Deuteronomy 8. Okay? Now, we're not going to chase all these down, but just noting where this comes from. Then the devil took him into the holy city. He set him on the pinnacle of the temple, and said to him, If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, He will command His angels concerning you, and on their hands they will bear you up, so that you don't dash your foot against a stone. You can almost imagine the sarcasm in Satan's voice, but maybe he didn't dare speak in that way to the Son of God. I don't know. That would be interesting to watch that footage. Um, maybe one day. We'll see. But for now, let's see where the devil is quoting from. Some of you might recognize this from a popular psalm, Psalm 91, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so let's go over there. 91. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of Yahweh, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. For He will deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the deadly pestilence. All right, so let's keep reading. Here we get to this place. For He will put His angels in charge of you to guard you in all your ways. They will bear you up in their hands, so that you won't dash your foot against a stone. Okay, we are talking about a psalm for anyone who dwells in the secret place of the Most High. Okay, so this is not necessarily a messianic psalm, but it certainly would apply. And so the devil, takes his shot, wants to see if he can trip Jesus up with this one. Although you have to wonder, did he really think he was going to succeed? Anyway, we'll keep reading. So Jesus responds, "Again it is written, you shall not test the Lord your God." Okay, where's that from? Deuteronomy 6. Okay, still in Deuteronomy. Again, the devil took him to an exceedingly high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. He said to him, "I will give you all of these things if you will fall down and worship me." Then Jesus said to him, "Get behind me, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and you shall serve him only." All right. Well, what do you know? Also from Deuteronomy. So, okay, all three times that Jesus quotes from the Old Testament, he goes to the Torah, he goes to the books of Moses, but he stays in one book. He stays in the book of Deuteronomy. Now, that's kind of interesting because actually Jesus here is wandering in the wilderness. He's having his own wilderness wandering period, which kind of matches the 40 years that were in the wilderness for Israel. And then the devil comes at him with all this temptation stuff. And you can almost imagine that Jesus was meditating on the book of Deuteronomy as he is experiencing this wilderness wandering period in his own life. And here comes the devil with these temptations, and Jesus is basically like, well, let's keep this on theme. I don't have to go outside of Deuteronomy. I can go right to some verses within the book that matches the setting that I'm in. Almost as if he's doing spiritual battle with the devil with one arm tied behind his back. I don't even have to leave the book of Deuteronomy for this. It's just kind of interesting and very true to life. It's interesting as you read the Gospels and you just think, huh, that makes sense. Like, if someone was meditating on the book of Deuteronomy, for them to go to those passages and it all fits the setting, I mean, is that just a lucky coincidence that it would make sense in real life, or is Matthew reporting real events? I mean, that would certainly explain it, wouldn't it? I know it doesn't clinch the case. But it's just interesting, and these things do add up. So, all right, let's keep reading. So the devil left him, and behold, angels came and served him. Now, when Jesus heard that John was delivered up, he withdrew into Galilee. Delivered up meaning John was arrested. Leaving Nazareth, he came and lived in Capernaum, which is by the sea, in the region of Zebulun and Naphtali, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken through Isaiah the prophet, saying, "The land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, toward the sea, beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. The people who sat in darkness saw a great light. To those who sat in the region and shadow of death, to them light has dawned." Okay, so here now finally we have one of these. This happened that it might be fulfilled that was spoken through the prophets. So this is explicitly a fulfilled prophecy according to Matthew. So as we go through this series, we want to ask the question, well, how is Matthew using this prophecy? Does it make sense the way he's using it? And of course, what can we learn from it? Well, let's track it down. The book of Isaiah now. Let me switch my screen. On the right here, we have Matthew 4, and on the left, we have Isaiah 9, where this is quoted from. Let's see. Let's see if this is rightly applied as a messianic prophecy. But there will be no gloom for her who was in anguish. In the former time he brought into contempt the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the latter time he has made glorious the way of the sea, the land beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the nations. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Here comes this section here. Those who dwelt in a land of deep darkness, on them has light shone. You have multiplied the nation, you have increased its joy. They rejoice before you, as with joy at the harvest, as they are glad when they divide the spoil. For the yoke of his burden and the staff for his shoulder, the rod of his oppressor, you have broken, as on the day of Midian. For every boot of the tramping warrior in battle tumult, and every garment rolled in blood, will be burned as fuel for the fire. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given. Whoa, hold on. This is starting to sound awfully familiar, I suspect. This is a very famous passage to quote around Christmas time. I wonder why. And the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Okay, this person is called Mighty God. There's something to note. Again, we talk about Matthew subtly or not so subtly indicating that Jesus is God. Well, that is one of the names of this child, isn't it? Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and of peace there will be no end, on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and to uphold it with justice and righteousness from this time forth and forevermore. Oh, okay, that's escalating pretty quickly. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. All right, now this is one of those things where it's like, if this is not messianic, nothing is. I mean, this is very explicitly messianic. I mean, it's pretty much the definition of the Messiah. It's the king who sits on the throne of David, whose kingdom will have no end. And so, very interesting with that in consideration, that this does have a reference to the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, Galilee. So Galilee of the Gentiles, the land beyond the Jordan. This is certainly saying that a great light is going to dawn on this region that used to be regarded as a region of darkness. And Galilee, of course, is where Jesus comes from. He comes from Nazareth and went and lived in Capernaum. So again, this is very much matching this prophecy in Isaiah. Let's switch back over to Matthew 4. So Jesus went about in all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and every sickness among the people. Great multitudes from Galilee. So this is like a big deal, and it's all centered in Galilee. And it's like, wow, this is a very prominent, very obvious fulfillment of what Isaiah spoke in chapter 9. Very appropriate application here. So I think that we're going to end here. We start to get into the Sermon on the Mount in this next chapter. We'll see if maybe there's something to pull from there as far as Old Testament. But I think that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoy this type of content, please consider subscribing and clicking the notification bell so that you will be notified when we have new videos out. Thanks for watching.